Fallout 4 has 6 DLCs, 3 of which I'm 90% sure Fallout fans either don't know exist or just don't care about at all.
I don't have it in me no more. I just don't care.
One of the 6 allowing you to make the best version of RoboCop you possibly can.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Then the other 2 being actual proper story DLCs, the only actual proper story DLCs in the game, and available for purchase, in which one of them is said to be actually better than mainline Fallout 4's main story.
This is a load of barnacles.
And the other one, well, I don't know. People don't really seem to talk about it as much as Far Harbor, so it's very divisive. The one we will be focusing on is that other one, which is Fallout 4's Nuka-World DLC, in which we are going to be taking a look and evaluating how strong one of the 3 factions from this DLC is. The faction I have chosen for today that I'm going to be talking about and looking into is called the Pack. So without further ado, let's get into evaluating how strong the Pack are militaristically from Fallout 4's Nuka-World DLC. Before I continue with the video, however, I would ask that you like and subscribe. I'm back off holiday. I went to Amsterdam for a week and I'm back now making content, so I hope you guys enjoy. If you haven't seen the videos that I posted whilst I was on the holiday, I'd recommend them. The Still Wakes the Deep DLC review is very high quality, even though it got no views, so I'd really appreciate if you'd give that video a like and a watch. Thank you guys ever so much for the support and watching the video. Make sure you hit the bell, like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. Enjoy the video. Nuka-World was an amusement park much like the ones out of our own world, based around the drink Nuka-Cola. However, after the bombs dropped, the park was taken over by 3 different raider gangs. The Pack is one of these said gangs that we will be taking a look at today. Each gang has their own theme, and the Pack's theme, funnily enough, is animals, hence why they're called the Pack. So first things first, let's start by breaking down all the Pack's numbers. The numbers of the men they have, the numbers of the weapons they have, and let's also take a very close look at what sort of equipment they have at their disposal. So let's start with equipment. The main weapon Pack gang members use is the handmade rifle, which to be fair, most of the Nuka-World raiders use as their main weapon. Also, the gun does around 32 damage, making it not the strongest gun we've looked at, but also by no means the weakest. It has a good fire rate, and it is a mid-ranged weapon, which allows members of the Pack to engage their enemies from both long range and close range, and of course mid-range, which is what the gun is designed to do. The gun costs 136 bottle caps, which is quite expensive, so I can imagine that it takes quite a bit of production to make this gun, and quite a bit of hard labor. The gun is based off of the AK-47 of course, and to be fair, it does look beautiful. I can further see the evidence of how the gun may take a lot to make in how many other weapons the Pack also use outside of just this handmade rifle. The Pack uses guns such as machine guns, pipe pistols, baseball bats, and even combat shotguns. As for armor, the Pack can be seen wearing cage-like armor. Most of them always have animal-based masks and sport bright colored clothes, and their AKs are also colored, which is actually a really cool design, I feel. Their armor is not great, and to be fair, most of the time they don't wear armor at all, which can leave a lot of easy holes for you to target. It also doesn't help, of course, that they're extremely bright colored, so you can see them from about a mile away, and most of them just wear masks and face paint, so you won't actually have to worry about armor. But when they are seen wearing armor, it's normally minimal cage armor. Now let's talk about the numbers. The Pack has around 50 members. Now I got this figure from how many Nuka-World raiders you can kill in total, which is 80. Now I know 80 divided by 3 is not 50, it's 20 something. However,
yeah man, I think Rachel's beautiful because she's got good brains.
That being said, I added on another 20 because I feel that it's only fair considering I did the same for other factions, and it also would make sense that there are more raiders that either fled or we didn't kill because there would just be too many enemies on the screen to kill at once. Or maybe there were raiders outside of Nuka-World when we took down the compound. So I'm saying there are 50 members of the Pack, which would place them at the second smallest faction that I've looked at so far. Interestingly enough, I actually now can confirm I got this wrong, and they are in fact the smallest faction I've ever looked at. I didn't realize the Enclave had as many troops as they did. their firepower and capabilities may well make up for this, as I think they would have around 30 handmade rifles and then around 50 other weapons such as other guns and melee weapons. Now the pack, being an animal themed faction, do have one more major advantage to their faction that other factions don't have, and that's that they have a lot of animals, and I mean a lot. The ones we know of include the pack's rabid dogs, Brahmin, and at least one gorilla and one bear. So I will say that they have 12 animals plus one bear and one gorilla. And when I said 12 animals, I mean 12 rabid dogs, as I won't count Brahmin because, well, they're not exactly doing anything in a fight. We also know that the pack has at least one set of power armor, and the pack has at least 2 fat men, aka mini nukes, as if you choose to fight them, we can be seeing pack members very rarely use the mini nuke against you. So that means they have at least more than one, so I'll just say 2. So without further ado, this is the final statistics for the pack's numbers and equipment. Now let's take a look at the pack's base. All of the bases we will be looking at for the Nuka-World raiders all share the same basic location on the whole. They're all located inside the Nuka-World main park. This gives them all an immediate advantage as the park is heavily enclosed with only one main entrance. Now this means 2 things. The park has 3 raider gangs. If we're assuming all the gangs are working together, then to even get to the pack themselves, you may have to fight 2 other entire factions which are nearly both as equal in strength and numbers and fighting capability as the pack themselves. And if we are assuming they are not working together and are enemies or just aren't working together, then the pack could easily defend from the front of Nuka-World, not even having to defend from their main base. For anyone to push further into the base, they would first have to get through this intensely tight firefight where the pack would easily have the advantage holding the main part of Nuka-World. And that's before they could even get to the pack's main base. Now their base, which is inside Nuka-World, is located at the amphitheater section of the park. Once again, this part of the park only has one entrance, and it's guarded by many pack members with high caliber machine guns and handmade rifles. This means anyone who would want to attack the main base of the pack would first have to make their way through Nuka-World to find the pack's actual base, and even once they did, they would only be able to enter through one set of doors in a choke point, which would lead most factions to be completely shredded by the pack's strong firepower, leaving the only other way of attacking the pack being from the air, which you could do. However, Nuka-World would be hard to fly around in an air vehicle such as a vertibird, pointing out bits that are, as well, you know, it's an amusement park. So you would need to fly incredibly well to avoid these points, not to mention the fact that the pack themselves would be firing at you with their missile launchers and their mini nukes, which could do insane damage to your air capabilities. If you did make it into the pack's actual base through the choke point, being on the ground, then you would then have to fight through their close-quartered courtyard, where you would be put up against the pack's trump card, their lethal animals, which would tear other fleshy factions to bits, such as the Minutemen and Railroad. The only way to take on these rabid dogs, one bear, and at least one gorilla is if your faction has power armor or is robot based, which only a few factions are. If you manage to clear the main courtyard with the few troops you would then inevitably have left, you would then need to fight your way through a series of very close encountered rooms and buildings, where the pack would definitely have the advantage using their shotguns to pick you off the minute you enter the buildings. This fighting would be bloody and brutal, and I don't think many factions would get through it, as this would require your faction to have a lot of manpower and troops to just make it inside the buildings and put up a decent fight. Even then, if you've cleared the buildings from top to bottom, you'd have to finish by going into the basement, where you'd have to fight the last of the pack's violent and vicious fighters, once again in close quarters, where your faction would almost definitely have the lower hand, as the pack would know these basements like the inside of their palm. Put it simply, pack's main base would be a nightmare to clear out. Not to mention the very fact that Commonwealth-based factions would have to find Nuka-World, then find a way to get into the theme park with a mobilized army, which they most likely wouldn't be able to do, and then to top it off, they most likely wouldn't be able to call for reinforcements from the Commonwealth as they'd be too far away, and then finally, once they've made it to Nuka-World with a mobilized army and established that they can't call for reinforcements or reinforcements won't get there in time, they would then have to find the pack's base within Nuka-World, whilst either fighting all the other raiders or fighting the pack up to their front door, in which you then have to fight them in close quarters with rabid dogs, a gorilla, and a bear. I mean, fuck, that is tough. Not to mention you then have to fight them in close quarters. Jeez, that is a tough fight. Not to mention you'd also have to kill their leader, who himself is kitted out, but I'll come on to that a bit later. Oh, and also I'd like to mention that it's highly possible that the pack could have multiple territories within Nuka-World, outside the main park in other regions and districts of the further park. I can infer this as if we do their main quest, you end up giving them bits and bobs of land within the park, so it's very possible that even if they're on their own, they have many different outposts, which just further complicates taking them down militaristically, as you'd not only have to fight them at their main hub in Nuka-World, but you would then also have to fight them across many different sections of the park itself, which within themselves are probably as highly fortified and protected and as hard to get into as Nuka-World, creating similarly hard battles for the attacking force. So overall, I'm going to give this highly effective base a 90% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness for bases. Now let's take a look at what sort of tactics the pack use to win their battles, because tactics, as Napoleon once said, are very important. I don't know if he ever said that, I made it up to be honest. The pack are an animal-based faction, so they use very wild tactics. The best way I could describe them would be if the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel had a child, and that child was their version of their tactics. I say this because the pack have a complete disregard for their own lives, charging head first using their numbers they have to their advantage to overwhelm their enemies in battle. Their men are relentless fighters and charge head first using numbers to overpower smaller, lesser factions than they are themselves. This often leads to a quick, decisive victory where not many of the pack's members have fallen. This is because the factions they fight are often, well, settlers to be honest, so hardly factions at all, but even when they fight people that outnumber them, they normally look so terrifying and run with such strength and willpower that they win the battles anyway. The only issue with this is, if you are a faction that has any kind of tactical based thinking, then you would just end up embedding your lines and holding position, and taking up a defensive position. This is where the pack would most likely fail in battle, as they would not be able to penetrate through fortified lines, as once again I said this, the pack's tactics rely on being very wild. They charge at you with no regard for their own lives, wielding their handmade rifles, firing at whatever they see. If you're fighting a faction that has any kind of tactical thinking that's embedded their lines, then the pack most likely is just going to get gunned down. Now the pack of course do have their trump card, their animal units, which makes them unique, which they can pull, such as their gorilla and bear and rabid dogs, and this also makes them kind of a guerrilla warfare type fighter. As for their animals to work really well, they need to be defending a location where they can be in a very enclosed area and take up hiding defensive positions whilst they push their animals out to slaughter the enemies that are enclosing on them. When this happens, it often works, leading to the pack having a precise victory through their animals and through taking up hidden guerrilla warfare like positions. And overall I would say the pack defending works way better than when they're attacking, which is very strange considering how wild they are with their tactics. And I would say they actually have the advantage defending than attacking. Whereas on the attack, they don't stand much of a chance against an organized faction, even if they can deal with small unorganized ones. For example, if you put the Brotherhood of Steel, Institute, or maybe even Railroad and Minutemen in front of them, I don't think they stand much of a chance against any of them just because of their basic tactics and how organized they can be. Even a faction like the Railroad and Minutemen are more organized than the pack. This, at least in my opinion, makes them pretty weak when it comes to their tactical thinking and their tactics. To be fair, they are far better defending against an attacker than attacking someone. But when it comes to attacking, I really struggle to see any or many factions at all struggling to deal with them, as they are unorganized and even the most weak faction in numbers too. So it's safe to say that most factions could walk through them even if they had no tactics, like the Minutemen, which would just completely outnumber them, even if they didn't outgun them. The pack's guns are incredibly strong, and this also allows them to be very blasé and allows that forward-pushing mentality to work. But when you're dealing with organized factions that have tactics and also better weapons and more numbers, there's no way you're going to win. Defensively, like I said, it's a different story. But even then, I think you have to factor in their numbers, as the pack are very weak in numbers, and factions with large numbers could very easily swarm the pack and obliterate them. And the pack overall really don't have much tactical thinking to counter-attack or come up with other ways of dealing with situations. So if a faction did use some sort of tactics to slowly move in on their defensive positions or just throw numbers at them, I don't think the pack would do much. The only thing they really have over other factions is how willing they are to fight and how disregardful they are for their own lives, which makes them dangerous in a very kamikaze kind of way. And of course, their animal trump card overall is very different and helps them enormously in their battles. But other than that, they haven't really got much going for them when it comes to tactics. So I'm going to give the pack a 25% effectiveness on the effectiveness scale for tactics. It's really hard to actually pinpoint where the pack's biggest feat would be, because they do have a few. I mean, you could go as far to say them staying as a strong, organized raider gang is quite a large feat within of itself, as most raider gangs fall apart very quickly and have no real theme or real direction. This one, on the other hand, has clearly got both a theme and a direction, being, you know, the wild animal-based pack, and having the direction of being a large, centralized base in Nuka-World that wants to spread its power into the Commonwealth and take over settlements, which in of itself you can praise them for, as most raider gangs are very easy to defeat and fall apart very quickly. I think their biggest feat, however, would be if you get the ending where you actually have to take them on and take them out, as they single-handedly take over the plant at Nuka-World and put up a very strong hold against many other factions, two to be exact, if you have that many in the game at that point. And even if there only is one, that's one of a whole raider Nuka-World based faction. It's here where you can see just how good the pack are at defense and how strong the pack are at fighting on the offense and holding their lines. And they use cheap hiding spots to surprise other factions and enemies that are advancing on them. They put up a very strong fight against two other incredibly strong and powerful factions and the player, and they are not pushovers at all. Or even, to be fair, we could say the same thing on the other way around if the pack were attacking a defending faction in the same quest line, as they show just how relentless they are at attacking their enemies and how much their will is to keep fighting against the defenders inside the plant. We really get a sense of just how fearless the pack are here and how ruthless they are and willing to fight they are, and of course willing to win. On the attack, the pack do an incredible job of suppressing the enemies defending with their handmade rifles and showing them who's boss. I know they're not the most exciting best feats of all, and there's definitely been a lot of better feats in this series that we've looked at from other factions. However, I'd say that this one still goes quite far to show how well the pack can both defend against two other factions attacking them, plus the player of course, and attack one faction defending a very secure and strong location. This, in my opinion, is an impressive feat in many different ways, and of course I had to have something for this section, otherwise I would just have nothing for their best feat. But overall, this is a pretty good feat, I would say. Not as good as many other factions, in fact nowhere near as good as some other factions like the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute and those lot. However, it's still a strong feat. The pack's leader is Mason. Now, he leads the pack as the alpha in control, and he leads with an iron fist of control. By being the strongest member of the pack, he takes position as the alpha. Oh damn, this sounds so fucking cringe. The pack's leader leads through fear and strength. This makes his men deadly loyal to him and serve him as the alpha of the faction. The men he leads are like literal animals, hence why they join the pack, and are nearly uncontrollable, but yet they listen to him. This is because of how terrifying he is in battle and how strong he is as a leader. So therefore, they will do whatever he wants them to without question. He knows his men well, and he seems to have a good connection with them, even though they still keep a good distance away from him, as they know his power and fear what he will do to them if they step out of line, and understand, of course, what he's capable of doing to them, if he so pleases to. It also helps that he is a very strong fighter, and of course would probably go as far to say he is the strongest out of the 3 leaders in Nuka-World to fight against, that is. This also probably helps to keep him in power, as it's very clear the strongest is the one who is in charge of the pack, so it helps that he is strong and willing to fight in battle alongside his men. This will help his men, of course, look up to him. Not to mention, he even clearly shows fear to you, the player, if you intimidate him in a speech check.
Be a good dog and do what you're told, or you'll be put down.
Whoa there, boss. Not in front of my guys, all right? You got enough to worry about without a dominant struggle inside the pack to deal with. You know what? I think we're not so different, me and you. I want you to have this. Consider it a token of our mutual understanding and respect.
But that fear is for 2 reasons. 1, because he's genuinely afraid of what you've said to him and he's actually scared of you, and 2, and more importantly, because he knows his men will eat him alive if they find out that he has any weakness in his leadership. This makes him an incredibly strong and scary and powerful leader, but at the same time, a very, very, very vulnerable one, as if he does accidentally slip up and show any sort of emotion that the other pack members don't like, whether it be fear or too much niceness or any form of vulnerability for that matter, he will be replaced by someone else. As it's clear in the pack, the alpha is the one who's the strongest and the one everyone else fears the most, and who knows what will happen to him if that happens. Overall, he's a great leader and even comes to fight in battle alongside his men, but he is very vulnerable. So I'm going to give the pack's leadership a 85% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness for leadership. Now let's talk about the pack's rather strange and very different chain of command, because they have a very interesting version of the chain of command system, unlike any other one we have looked at so far in this series, which is very interesting. Now, I say this because you would think a group like the pack wouldn't have a chain of command at all, and you would kind of be correct, but at the same time you would also not be correct, as the pack does in fact have some kind of chain of command system, but at the same time they don't. Let me explain. Now, the pack, put simple, does not have a real form of the chain of command system. There's no rank system, there's no military ranks, there's no person in charge of another person, there's no sergeants or generals, there's none of that. No one holds any important position outside of the main person, the leader, the pack alpha, of course, which is the highest role you can have in the pack.
Say what?
The pack, of course, is based off of animal packs in the wild, packs such as wolf packs or other beast-like packs, which while don't have a traditional rank system similarly to the pack, they do have something quite interesting. They have a hierarchy system which, similarly to the pack, also has, which is the exact same, pretty much, as the pack. While the pack doesn't have a military-inspired rank system, they do have a hierarchy system like many actual animal packs do, where the pack's slaves are at the bottom, being furthest away from being able to be pack alpha, then their animals that they obviously lead into battle, which is kind of strange. I would have thought they cared about them more, but then followed up by them, in which your place in the pack depends on how strong you are, how intimidating you are, and how loyal you are to the pack and their cause. Now, this can be very confusing because it means positions of power can change and will change every single day. However, it works well for this pack. It works well for this faction to keep the members of the pack all together. You have to remember these are complete psychopaths, and this system does work at keeping them in check and keeping them as one strong unit that works together. So in my opinion, there are 2 sides to this system. On one side, on one hand, I don't think it works. And on the other hand, I really think it's a smart system that works for this specific faction extremely well, but wouldn't work for any other faction. And I stand by that. And it works for only them. And I mean only the pack, no other faction. It can be confusing and it can cause a lot of power struggles within the pack, which leads to, of course, a lot of issues. However, at the same time, it seems to be the only way of keeping these literal animal-based psychopaths together as one group. So I'm going to be giving the pack's chain of command just because it keeps them as one unit, it keeps them strong, it keeps their pack mentality together, and it works well at creating a good leader for them. I'm going to actually give them a 60% effectiveness on the scale of effectiveness for chain of command. Now the final and last thing I want to do is compare the pack to another real life military force. And I'm going to be real, this was a really hard thing to do for the pack, unlike any other faction I had looked at before. Normally it's really easy. I will compare different factions to the US Army, then I'll compare them to whatever past or present army there is or has been that they take the best liking to, in my opinion. With the pack, it's a little bit more difficult. I mean, the US Army is an easy one to compare them to because there's nothing in common between the two. The only thing in common is they both use very powerful guns, I suppose, and they both use dogs. That's literally it. And in terms of power scaling, the US Army would completely walk over the pack without even having to worry. Like, they'd do it like it was nothing. So it was actually really hard to compare them. So instead of actually comparing them to a real military faction, I'm going to be instead comparing them to what I think they are most like. And that, in my opinion, is cave-like tribesmen from Far Cry Primal. And I'm not even kidding. Now, I know that that sounds kind of ridiculous, but it's true. The pack are based on primal pack animal groups, so it makes sense that the people most like them would be literally bloodthirsty cavemen, tribal men. I know that they are a lot more kitted out than cavemen of our past day and a lot more organized and they have a leader, but if I had to compare them to anyone, it would be cavemen. They look like cavemen, they use war paint, they have a general disregard for their own health and will scream charging into battle. They're like crazy cavemen that just adopted a dog. That's how I would describe the pack. And I actually think it fits them very well. The only thing that's not on par is their firepower, but overall I think they fight like cavemen, charging forward animalistically with a general disregard for their own bodies and just doing everything they can to cause as much damage as they can. So that's why I think they're like cavemen. The pack are a very formidable and strong fighting force. They have great equipment and use animals, which is like their trump card in their battles. However, they are unorganized and lack the critical thinking to form a proper plan of attack to defeat their enemies in a battle. Their leader is strong, however he can be exploited by his men if they pick up on any weakness he shows and if they do wish to. They have a strong and nearly impenetrable base that can be held very easily by the pack's strong armed fighters. They have no chain of command, which is very messy and unorganized to the uneducated eye. However, this does work at keeping the pack's savage and often cruel members together in one kind of strange animal family. The pack are a strong force but have many flaws, but even with those flaws, they are still a strong fighting force and one not to be reckoned with. These are my final statistics for the pack. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I was trying to get to that 30-minute mark. No, I'm hoping that's not noticeable. Actually, probably shouldn't say that. Yeah, no. Actually, that sounds really bad. But still, sorry I haven't been uploading recently. I was on holiday, and then I pretty much only just got back, and I wanted to do a proper big video for you all. So I hope this one ends off July quite nicely. I hope you enjoy this video. I really like this video. And yeah, I'm now doing DLC content for Fallout 4. This is all the Nuka-World factions I'll be covering first, guys. Then I'll be going to Far Harbor, and I'll probably do the Automatron, or whatever his name is, the robot one, as well. So thank you guys ever so much for watching. Please leave the video a like and subscribe with the bell on. It would be very much appreciated to boost the channel. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you've all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, guys, and peace.